So, folks, we lost a real one, a based pope. Yes, Pope Francis dies at 88 after final appeal for Gaza ceasefire. That's right. One of the last public statements he made had to do with the genocide in Gaza. The Vatican announced Monday that Pope Francis has died at the age of 88, hours after he appeared at an Easter Mass and appealed for an end to Israel's war on the Gaza Strip. The Pope's Easter address, read aloud by Archbishop Diego Ravelli, decried the terrible conflict in Gaza that continues to cause death and destruction and to create a dramatic and deplorable humanitarian situation. News of Pope Francis's death came after a bout with double pneumonia left him hospitalized for more than a month. The Vatican did not specify a cause of death, and its announcement was a stroke. We now know that since the publication of this piece. The Nation's John Nichols wrote Sunday that Pope Francis's calls for peace have made him arguably the most consistent high-profile defender of the humanity of the Palestinian people during a period when the Israeli assault on Gaza has been pursued with relentless violence. In a tribute to Pope Francis, Palestinian theologian Munther Isaac wrote Monday that he conveyed true compassion to Palestinians, most notably to those in Gaza during this genocide. The Pope left our world today, and the occupation and the wall remained. Even worse, he left our world while a genocide continues to unfold, Isaac wrote, pointing to the pontiff's call for a thorough international investigation of Israel's assault on Gaza. So yes, Munther Isaac is the pastor from Bethlehem, which is, of course, in the occupied West Bank. We've featured both his sermons and some of his interviews several times over the past year and a half. Palestinians and Palestinian Christians in particular have lost a dear friend today. Pope Francis was beloved in Palestine. He conveyed true compassion to Palestinians, most notably to those in Gaza during this genocide. His pastoral heart was evident in his insistence on calling the Christian community besieged in Gaza on a constant basis, even from his hospital. Some years ago, Pope Francis visited Bethlehem. We all remember the iconic image of him praying at the wall. This is what I wrote about this incident in my book, The Other Side of the Wall. And this continues, fairly long tweet. I took some highlights. When Pope Francis stopped, touched the wall, and said a prayer, it was truly a monumental moment that made waves in world news. Pope Francis couldn't help but notice the ugliness of this concrete structure at the heart of Bethlehem. This wall should make us all uncomfortable. To this discomfort, the Pope couldn't help but react and reach out. By responding in this manner, the Pope touched more than the wall. He touched the ugliness of the occupation and war. He touched the depth of our suffering. With humility and weakness, he looked injustice in the eyes and challenged it. So here he is at the wall. Today, I wonder, will the millions who mourn his death these coming days respect this wish of his? Will they care for Gazans and Palestinians the way he did? May his soul rest in glory with his Savior. Humanity lost a special soul today. And yes, this was an article in The Guardian in 2014 when he made this visit. Pope Francis offers prayers at Israeli separation wall in Bethlehem. You see Free Palestine painted on the occupied side of the wall. Stop rouses controversy as Pontiff invites Perez and Abbas to Rome in unprecedented papal intervention in peace process. And yes, he did make hundreds of calls per day into Gaza until the end. So here is some video of that. Pope Francis made about 470 daily video calls to Gaza during Israel's massacre.
Salam alaikum. حبيبنا se nos amato papa appreciate your appreciate acá venía a saludar a algunos bandidos. Este es Carlito. Vos. Ahí va, vos el baba. Ahí va. Este es baba. Bye bye. Bye bye. Ok, muchas gracias, Santo Padre.
Muchas gracias, Santo Padre.
Grazie tante.
Vuoi ringraziare, pregare per lei, chiedere sempre prega per loro, prega a favore, no contro.
Sì, sì, grazie, padre.
Of course, towards the end, getting older, faster, and becoming more frail. But here he was in December of last year. In his final Easter message, he called for a Gaza ceasefire and condemned the deplorable humanitarian situation. In December, he said of an Israeli strike that killed children, "This is cruelty. This is not war."
Sono stati bombardati bambini. Questo è crudeltà, questo non è guerra. Voglio dirlo perché tocca al cuore.
And our friend Dave DeCamp here says, the man was excellent on the issue of war. Rest in peace, Pope Francis. And a little epilogue to this slideshow here. Here he is checking Netanyahu for saying that Jesus spoke Hebrew. He corrects him Aramaic.
Gesù ha vissuto qui. Parlava ebraico.
That's right. One more time.
Gesù ha vissuto qui. Parlava ebraico.
There you have it. The based Pope. The based Pope Francis. The first non-European Pope, by the way, in 1,300 years. Over 1,000 years since we've had a non-European Pope. I remember when he came and spoke at Madison Square Garden. Those were back in my street peddler days. I sold buttons to the people outside waiting for him in the parade. I actually sold 2 Pope buttons to the naked cowboy. I tried to find the
Did
photo.
you really?
Yeah, I tried to find the photo for this segment, but he bought 2 buttons and he put one on each ass cheek on his underwear and made me take a picture of that. It's got to be. I don't know if it's on my Facebook or somewhere. I think I posted that. But yeah, man, a based Pope. We'll get into some of the very touching MAGA eulogies as well as the hot shot who they want to replace him. We have a couple more pieces on that. But yeah, I mean, when you look at the response to this from a guy like Munther Isaac, you can see that for whatever flaws he may have, you may want to talk about. I know a lot of people really criticized him for reducing the immigration issue down to one of, racism and tolerance. Hey, I got to say, you know what, MAGA, you did yourself no favors in that argument. You really have no right to argue that you approached that issue in good faith, as far as I could see, given the record here in the first 90 days. But yeah, overall, he was a man of peace. We've always said this about Pope Francis. As popes go, seem pretty based. And now, obviously, you can look at the institution of the Catholic Church and make countless criticisms there. But if you grade him on a curve versus past popes, he was a real one by comparison, for sure.
The whole thing with the Catholic Church and the Pope and that history, it's very complex. Of course, the institution has committed a lot of crimes over the course of its history. A lot of people, when they go to the Vatican, have a very negative reaction, because it is, when you go to the Vatican Museum, it really does feel like you're rummaging around Western civilization's crazy aunt's attic.
Right.
This is all the stuff that was hoarded over a millennium, right? It's just rooms and rooms and rooms of porcelain figurines and maps and wood carvings of animals, just an endless amount. It feels just like you hoarded everything that came your way for over 1,000 years and just put it in rooms.
Right.
And yes, it does feel, when you're going through that, it does, of course, call to mind the corruption that this institution is often emblemized in many ways. You've had a lot of corrupt popes during particularly during centuries where the male heirs who were not first in line to inherit the estates, the other path to power was through the church. So you had all of these people enter the church who didn't actually enter the church because they wanted to devote themselves to a religious principle. It was because the firstborn was going to inherit the estate. It was the only other way to power.
Right.
So you very often in these aristocratic families had the Lord was one brother and the other brother was a cardinal. So yeah, I think the church is often called out for that, rightly so. The question is, can the institution evolve? And I think the philosophical question that's most interesting is, I grew up in a Catholic neighborhood. I used to talk about this with my friends a lot. And one of them, actually, James, who's been on the show before, we used to uh, examine this history quite a bit. And, he would often point out, look, at the time that they founded this church, remember, this is within an empire where the basic principle of, the emperor can just stab anybody. That was pretty much the way that things were. So this idea that the meek are blessed, that you
Right.
should turn the other cheek in the face of violence, that was a very radical moral doctrine at the time. The question, because of course Christianity was spread at the end of a sword, a complete contradiction of its underlying message. The question, did introducing these ideas into a world of predator prey relationships between the powerful and the oppressed, did it end up doing more good than harm? Is the world better for it having existed? And I think you could definitely argue probably so, and that there's room for this institution to evolve beyond its past corruption. And taking all that into account, Francis was going a long way towards allowing that institution to evolve into the ideal that it is so often not lived up to.
Yeah, well, I mean, his approach seemed to be, and look, I'm not a religious person, so I'm not going to pretend to be an expert on, not an expert, not an expert on
Have you ever
Catholicism.
been?
Have you ever
I've
been to the
been.
Vatican?
I
I've
have
been to the
been.
Russell has been to the Vatican, so maybe I should cease speaking. Let my partner, who's been, talk about the church and the Vatican. No, but he seemed to have a more spiritual understanding of religion than a lot of
Right.
his detractors wanted to. The core, I mean, aside from the earthly concerns about immigration and open borders and that, which we'll get into, one of the things they really took issue with, which we'll see in more detail in one of these next pieces, is the fact that, he said that, different religions are different pathways to God, and that even atheists will not be shunned when they die. There's this video of this kid who asked,
Right.
my
Yes.
dad was an atheist. Is he going to go to heaven? He said, God will not turn your back on him. And the kid got very, very choked up and gave him a big hug. Like he seemed to just on that level view religion as a vessel for humanity rather
Right.
than
Yes.
this very transactional relationship that a lot of his critics have of him, which is that no, actually, religion is a transaction. It's we worship
Right.
God, God lets us into paradise.
Right.
Those who don't worship God don't get into paradise. He seemed to, from what we could tell, reject that very transactional understanding of it.
Well, really, like, what kind of sicko would want him to give a different answer to the kid?
To the kid, yeah, no, he's
Your
going
father,
to hell.
you're going to the eternal fire. They're going
He's
to
going
the
to hell,
demons.
yes.
They poke him with the pitchfork.
If you want to see
forever.
your father again, you're going to have to do a lifetime of
You
gay
got-
sex so that you go to
Yeah,
hell
so
too,
you go to
and
hell
so you see him
too.
again.
You want to see your father? You better fuck a guy.
Exactly. Yeah. Like, what do they want to say?
Like,
Yeah.
what do you want from him? Yeah. Well, this is what I mean. He was trying to evolve Catholicism, I think, with responses like that and observations like that, even with whether gay people are
He said
sinful
they were
or
welcome too.
damned.
Yes, he was pro-gay. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And that's, because a lot of people who are attracted to a much more strict Catholicism, I mean, that's not a bug. That's the feature. They want that very strict morality. They don't want Christianity to actually be Christian. They want it to
Right.
be another form of fascism, another form of imposed rules that you can inflict on people as a punishment. It's another means of moral justification and punishing the other.
100%. Yes, yes. It's a very fire and brimstone interpretation of it, which that's the theme of their whole worldview, as we see. They want to be dominated by a strong man. That's what they want. That's what they want. And Pope Francis did not provide that. He had a much more gentle and humane view of things. Now, his place within the legacy of the church is complicated because the legacy of the church is complicated at best, right? So, to litigate that is a much bigger issue, and it's really one that's probably not fair to him because how much influence can one man have, right, within an organization like that? And to the extent he wielded it, he seemed to do so positively. That's what I mean. Yeah, like he seemed to have done his part.
Well, some of the irony of these conservatives going to the Catholic Church for the fire and brimstone. I mean, certainly it has gone through phases like that, but in the Middle Ages and up through the Protestant Revolution, the Catholic Church, because of the core belief in original sin, generally was not, obviously you had the Inquisition, you had these flare-ups, but generally their attitude was, because you're a sinner, yeah, okay, we'll take you, whatever. Very, very common behind Catholic churches would be the local red light district, because people would go and sin and then they'd go to the church and confess.
Right.
So now you washed it all away. It was just assumed that you're sinful. And you go to the church and you say your Hail Marys, you do your magic incantations, you do your rituals, and then you're forgiven. It was really the Protestant Reformation that pushed this idea of fire and brimstone, because it goes with the idea that what you do in this life is impactful on whether you go to heaven or hell, rather than that it's by the grace of Jesus that you're saved, not through any works that you may do.
Right. Exactly.
Please clap.